Hello there, Stalkers. Just wanted to welcome you to the video, and without further interference from me, let's get on with it. So, straight away, we see a small room with a bunker door, and that was shot. The light is rotating above us. This very, very heavily reminds me of Sidorovich's bunker. Something to note, though, is that the door design has changed and is now hinged from the opposite side, while also lacking a viewport. But I think that this is probably just minor aesthetic changes, given it's a very old game, and this is now a very, very new location. Plus, we can actually see that the GSC logo is over what appears to be a porthole, where a porthole style window would actually be in this door. However, there does seem to be several things that also point to this not being Sidorovich's bunker. For a start, the piping in the corner and above the doorway, they're not present in the original bunker. Plus, that blue cabinet on the left, that's also new. In addition to these points, the grid in the floor, just outside the door, hasn't been seen before. Another piece of evidence that points towards this not being Sidorovich's bunker is also the fact that the walls don't taper. They aren't arched like they are in the original bunker, at least. Lastly, there is also rubble on the floor, and in previous games, when we started seeing rubble on the floor, not discarded cigarette packets or such, that was usually a indication that this was an abandoned location. For example, X18 and X16, you could see bits and pieces of debris on the floor, but personally, I would chalk that last bit, the rubble, simply just to being advancements in technology. I think that the devs just want us to see that this is a very old, very worn out location. Considering both sides of these arguments though, I feel it is extremely heavily implied that this is the entrance to Sidorovich's bunker, because what other community could you show a simple door opening in a small room and then make something out of it, which is tangible? This has to be Sidorovich's bunker in my mind. Something new that also could imply that this is the bunker is the electrical cabinet and those rotating lights, not to mention the two light bulbs that are hanging from the ceiling. And why is that, you might ask? Well, the lights are working, and working electronics in the Stalker universe usually indicates some form of human presence. Granted, this can mean it was a past presence, such as the case of X16, but usually when you see lights like this, you also see at least human enemies. You see at least someone there. Very Pripyat. It was going to come in this trailer. We had to get Pripyat. If we didn't, people would be very confused. Initially, there's not much to be said here other than the fact that the famous Ferris wheel is now being depicted where it actually is in the I forget its name, but it's no longer being depicted right in the middle of Pripyat's urbanized area, because it's not there. It's in a small amusement park with the dodgems that we can actually see just behind it in this shot. What is also seemingly clear is the fact that there is not a massive electro anomaly smack bang in the middle of the Ferris wheel anymore, which Brent was getting near it in Shadow of Chernobyl. Now, looking at the base of the Ferris wheel, we can see not one, but three creatures actually run past, and it's hard to make out exactly what they are, but personally I'm leaning towards pseudo-dogs. Given where they are, it's also possible that they might even be Psy-dogs, given that this is heavily implied. Well, this is Pripyat, we can see the Ferris wheel. I also make this assumption based upon two other factors. One, they're acting together as a pack. These three creatures are moving in the same direction in almost a formation style. They are moving as you would see a dog pack move. One is leading, other ones are following, slightly spread out. And the second one is, these creatures, it's hard to tell, but they look like they don't have much fur, and they also seem to have a stockier front half, similar to the pseudo-dogs of previous games. Interestingly, initially I thought that this was the corridor where you initially encounter your first controller in Shadow of Chernobyl, when you're taking the exit from the stash that leads to the Agripon Research Institute. But what shoots some major holes in that theory is the fact that the corridor is also now arched, and there are surfaces on both the left and right hand side of the tunnel. If I remember correctly, they were only on the right, because there was a single box you could break open which would distract you from the fact that a controller is now running right at you. Well, not running, limping. And then this happened, which also shot down the theory of it being that controller hallway. There is not one place in the original trilogy that I can consider to be this place. Closest I could say would be X16, but honestly that's just due to the sheer darkness of the place. X16, to the best of my knowledge, had no functional electrolytes once you were in the bowels of the facility. And this staircase also seemingly leads up to an apparently clear platform. We've never had a staircase like that in X16, let alone anywhere else that I can remember. Also, something to keep in mind that I find particularly interesting, just coming up, the orange light that flicks on has to be electrical in nature. It can't be a fire or some other natural light source. Just look how quickly it turns on, and how the light flickers in such a uniform manner. This can't be a fire. We would see a vastly different lighting effect. And what I would like you to keep in mind is that something has just turned on, and for that to happen, something else must just have turned it on. Hey, artifact. I tried to figure out what this is, but given the appearances of artifacts have changed between the games, I feel it's a fairly futile task. However, the artifact does vaguely remind me of the original Night Star. That being said, if this is Pripyat, a Night Star would be a reasonable guess based on its rarity. However, I take this as pure speculation. On to the actually interesting part of this clip, however. In a moment, we'll see a blue flash and some blind dogs run past. Now, this in and of itself isn't so important, but its implications are. If you look closely, you can see that the way the dogs run is reminiscent of how blind dogs moved in the original trilogy when they were trying to escape. They're hunched quite low, their tails are down, and they're in a loping run. What's nice about this is that it hints at Stalker's animal AI making a comeback in the new game. More than likely, these dogs have just tripped an electro anomaly and have, understandably, chosen to flee from it. If that is the case, it means that we might see some dynamic animal encounters in Stalker 2, where creatures will react to the world around them in an appropriate way, opposed to just charging at you or any other target until they die, like in some other games. We might even see this taken to the next extreme, where we'll see animals perhaps fighting each other, slightly similarly how they did in earlier games. Okay, so we see one electro-anomaly discharge, and then a massive secondary anomalous discharge. Let's just jump back to the start of this clip. I want you to pay attention to the doors and furniture on the right-hand side when the first anomaly triggers. They're shunted with some serious force. Once the second anomaly triggers, almost the entire room is disturbed, with the massive green piece of furniture to the camera's left actually being flung almost directly at it. I see three main takeaways from this clip. One, it's implied that anomalies can now interact with the props in the world, which frankly is awesome. I can't wait to see debris, boxes, furniture, things being physically blasted out of the way by anomalies. We always knew that these things were powerful, and now we get to see it in a whole new way. Two, anomalies, or at least these electros, seem like they'll be harder to spot. Yes, we can see the small arcs of electricity in the air, but we can't see where these electros actually are. And for me, I like that, because that means navigating an anomalous area is suddenly a lot harder. You need to really be pretty thorough with your bolts. You can't just look at electros and go, I can walk around that now. 3. Anomalies actually seem able to trigger one another. Watch that bolt. When it strikes that first electro, it drops to the floor and remains stationary. The only logical trigger for the bigger pulse to be discharged would be a metal object getting shunted from the first electro's blast into the trigger range of the second electro. If this makes it into the game, I will be extremely happy. Suddenly, we can't just wander into an anomaly and map out where its various bits and pieces are, and then just wander through it by not touching any trigger zones. When we're mapping it, we have to be careful and aware of our environments. We can't just lob out bolts anymore, because if we threw a bolt, we could well inadvertently trip the anomalies around us, resulting in an instant death maybe, if we're in a particularly strong or particularly dense anomaly. At first glance, this guy looks like a teleportation anomaly to me, and then it just decided to destroy 3 vehicles. My best guess is that this is the new appearance of the Whirligig anomaly, the one that would actually drag you in, pick you up into the air, and then blow you apart. It's obviously gravitational in nature, and it's elevated in the air, and that to me just screams Whirligig. Something I do find very curious, however, is that as the anomaly is expanding, as it's growing in size, it seems to be pushing against the vehicles, it's crushing them with its outward force. And then when it contracts, it's dragging them quite violently inwards. Now, it could be because the vehicles contain enough metal to trigger the anomaly, as that's the explanation of how anomalies trigger in the lore. But this could hint at what I would like to dub always-on anomalies. Because we've seen anomalies that are cuddled up with vehicles before, and they weren't constantly going off just because there was metal there. Yet this one seems repeatedly triggering again and again. As we see when the cut to black happens, you can see that cycle just begin again. You can see those vehicles start to become pushed at once more. I also just want to point out that the water physics look really damn good in this shot. Hey, it's the Rookie Village. Nothing much to say here other than the rookies actually seem notably better armed now. I'm seeing the leather jacket guy holding an AK, and I'm also seeing an SVD in the hands of the Stalker on the left, the guy who's standing up by the fireplace. They actually make me think of Wolf, especially Clear Sky Wolf, who wore the gas mask. However, Wolf never made use of an SVD and travelled to military warehouses and was debating joining Freedom during the events of Shadow of Chernobyl. If this is supposed to be Wolf, maybe he's joined Freedom, become a marksman, acquired an SVD, and at some later point he's left the faction and returned to the village in order to train more rookies. We also seem to have a new outfit shown off by Guitar Man and the individual past the leather jacket guy just as the fade to black occurs. Oh god, it's X16 on steroids. But there's something much more important than this ugly mug in front of us. Let's just watch that clip again, and this time I want you to pay attention to the area above and around that main tank in front of us. Lights are turning on both inside and outside of the surrounding tanks. The entire facility is turning back on. Also, take a look at this tank here. The creature within looks significantly more developed than the one we get a close-up of. It looks like a full torso with its arms crossed and the hands on the shoulders, almost as if it's mimicking a fetal position. This is important as it's long been speculated that these embryos are the early stages of both poltergeists and pyrogeists. Has someone literally just turned the Geist factory back on? Because that's a damn big thing if they have. Also, the little guy seems to be very aware of us, the camera approaching him. Unlike the dead embryos that we've seen in Shadow of Chernobyl, these ones are very much alive, and I would not be surprised if we have to deal with them at some point in Stalker 2. Alright, personally, I loved this. This guy and his pose is an absolutely lovely throwback to the artwork of Shadow of Chernobyl. But what interests me the most is this. That's not the Brain Scorcher. That can only be Duga 3, the Soviet over-the-horizon radar installation which is located inside of the zone. In the community there's always been some very heavy speculation about Duga 3, but never anything official. It's always been thought that Duga 3 had to be part or was very likely to be part of the network of mind control devices in the zone that protected Pripyat and the heart of the zone itself in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. If that is indeed the correct assumption, it seems that Duga 3 may also be inactive, assuming that our Stalker friend here is not under its influence. All that being said, however, there is something else that I find very peculiar that I want to take a look at. Look at those trees. None of them, bar perhaps the one in the distance, because we can't quite tell, have the low-level leaves. What's more is that there's an awful number of felled trees on the ground, and I don't know about you, Stalkers, but I don't know of any lumberjacks in the zone. Well, Stalkers, that was one man's whistle-stop analysis of Stalker 2's trailer. I, for one, am really looking forward to this game, and the trailer was an absolute treat from GSC. But that's it for now. Like, comment, subscribe, and if you haven't already, get out of here, Stalker.